Welcome to Straight from the CPA's Mouth, your connection to the Heshie CPA Knowledge Center, Alberta CPAs, and business professionals. This podcast, presented by the CPA Education Foundation, features Alberta Chartered Professional Accountants and others sharing their expertise and insights on a wide range of topics. Tune in regularly for eye-opening looks on leadership, business, education, and many issues of the day, straight from the CPA's mouth. Before we begin, in honor of the 94 calls to action put forth by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, we'd like to acknowledge that CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The CPA Education Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous peoples and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated.
Hello and welcome to Straight from the CPA's Mouth. My name is Kevin Sabila from the CPA Education Foundation, and I'll be your host for this episode. Whoever said change is the only constant in life must have been an accountant. Actually, I believe it was the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. We all know that life is full of change, and that is especially true in the world of taxation. Every time a new government is elected, provincial or federal, and an election promise is fulfilled, and a new policy is announced for the benefit of taxpayers, CPAs are there to interpret and manage and implement those policies. The pace and scope of that change can be quite daunting. Just think of the implications on taxes in the past 2 years alone due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is just one example of how the rules and regulations and guidelines and processes we use to interpret them and prepare our taxes have evolved over time. Joining me today to help us make sense of it all is Joe Devaney, CPA CA. He is the co-owner of Video Tax News, along with his sisters Caitlin Butler, CPA CA, and Sheena Tashima. We're going to talk about his lived experience and the evolution of tax over the past 5 or so years. So without further ado, let's hear it straight from the CPA's mouth. Hey Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today. You are our first live guest since the beginning of the pandemic, so welcome.
Well, thanks for being here. I didn't know you interviewed dead people, but hey, that's cool.
I actually don't know how to respond to that.
No problem. Just ask me a question. Let's roll.
All right. Okay, to kick things off then, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, area of expertise, that sort of thing?
Sure, yes. As you indicated earlier, I am a CPA, CA, and it runs in the family. I think we've got about 10 of us now between myself and cousins and parents and all that kind of stuff. I've had my designation for just over a decade, but Video Tax News, the company that I work with, is actually a family business that started over 40 years ago with my parents, my mother and my father. And they started off it as a consulting firm, turned it into a newsletter, and now we're basically an information and education provider right across Canada, primarily to CPAs, but also accountants of all types and preparers and planners. And all of my experience over the last 10 years has been with that organization, and I've also helped out with a number of small and medium firms as well with their tax planning and compliance work.
Okay. So as a CPA, obviously, as we kind of discussed briefly, there's a lot of change in the industry. Every time there's a new government, there's likely some changes to at least one tax law that means all of a sudden you need to become an expert in. And there's likely a big difference in how the different governments approach taxation and develop tax policy. Not to mention you throw in a global pandemic over the past 2 years, and we have a whole other episode we can do. So I guess first question, how does all this change and uncertainty affect how you as accountants do your jobs?
Well, just to start off with, every year when we do our courses, we do sort of two main courses. One is a tax update, general tax update, and the other one is a personal focused one. And in each of these books, we have about 500 pages of materials, changes, things that are new from each year, and that's in a normal year. Could you imagine what it's like, with all of this extra stuff going on?
Yeah.
So, first of all, we've got our normal stuff we've got to deal with. Then we've got to deal with a whole bunch of extra legislation in respect of benefits. They could be corporate benefits, subsidies. They could also be administrative policies from CRA in respect of, tax changes, forgiveness, relief, extra time, whatever it is. So the amount of things that accountants had to know and learn about over the past year has been incredible. I would say it's probably 6 to 7 years worth of changes jammed into 1 year.
Wow.
And you had to figure out all of these changes and what they meant in context of all the other changes and all the other stuff that you're used to. So as you mentioned, uncertainty is really the key. We don't really understand how everything works. We want to help our clients because our clients are suffering. They're going out of business. They're going through emotional issues. They've invested their whole life into different things and organizations and ideas. But now it's all going down the drain and they got to figure out what to do. And you're stressed because you got to learn all this new stuff. You got to figure out how it applies to everybody. But you're also worried about getting sued. Because the thing is, if you say something wrong or if you don't give the best advice that you can give, you have the potential for getting sued. And then come in questions like, am I even allowed to help out with these benefits and these applications? Am I qualified to answer these types of questions? And we've seen a couple court cases recently where people have dealt with new legislation and they've given advice or missed a small thing. You'd think they thought they caught it in time, but still not quick enough.
Right.
And an $800 engagement turned into a $75,000 penalty bill that they had to pay plus legal fees. So there's a lot of concern about doing the right things. What can I do? How do I bring it all together? A lot of stress out there.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things, too, when it comes to the uncertainty is you get a new program out, like call it the wage subsidy, the CEWS or Qs, whatever you want to call it. And you read the rules and you read all of the guidance and you think you got a handle for something. And then you start filing a bunch of returns that way and make applications. And you do it 5, 6, 7, 10 times and you're feeling comfortable. And then what happens is 4 or 5 months down the road, the government says, no, we didn't mean that. We meant something else. Now, all of a sudden, because you've repeated something so many times, you've sort of worked yourself into a false sense of security and comfort. And all of a sudden, you've got all these returns that you've dealt with, that you've done wrong according to CRA. And you know what? CRA might not even be right because they're getting information out late. They don't know everything about it. Finance is throwing stuff at them because the politicians have thrown stuff at finance to try to turn into law. But the politicians are just trying to keep everybody afloat too. So it's sort of a train, a series of these things, and all this pressure and uncertainty is being pushed down the train, and we've got to figure out how to deal with it. And it's just very stressful, very difficult. So at the end of the day, what it comes down to is not getting overconfident with things, being able to sort of calm your clients down, explaining the uncertainty the best way that you can, and just say, listen, all we can do right now is file under the best understanding that we have, document our reasons, so that when push comes to shove later, if we get it wrong, at least we can show why we get it wrong.
Right.
So you're going to limit liability, limit statute-barred reassessments from CRA and penalties and interest. So that's really what it's about at this point.
Right. So just a little pressure.
To say the least.
to say the least. But not a lot of allowance for error in the end of things.
Well, the problem is, when you have all of these moving parts, everybody is so exposed in many different ways. I mean, the government's getting hit left, right, and center by media and people asking questions. But, they've done a lot of good things too, and I don't think they're getting recognized for it. They've really dropped the ball in some cases. But, it comes down to us as accountants. Have we built a community? Have we built a client base where they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, where they're going to give you a second to sort of deal with things? Because if not, if the way you've sort of operated your entity has left you sort of open, exposed to somebody who's ticked off at you, you're going to have some troubles in these coming years here as the repercussions of all of these uncertain filings come through. So it really goes down to basic principles of just doing the right thing, doing the best thing that you can along the way, and that will sort of help when you get into these uncertain areas.
Right. So you did kind of answer my next question, from a client perspective, what are some of the challenges in dealing with clients amidst the uncertainty, and you talked about the risk of litigation and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, you could talk about this area just forever, for days and days and days, and I got to tell you, I'll go to a restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants, and I'll talk to the owner, and they'll say, well, my accountant said that I could do this or that. And then I have a little bit of a conversation with them saying, yeah, you know what, they're right, but there might also be this possibility. But because of those just general conversations, it's kind of neat. But, we've gotten comments from a number of different sources saying, hey, listen, you actually saved my business. And I mean, I'm not the only one who feels this. Pretty much every accountant has actually saved somebody's business these days. So while it is frustrating, while it is stressful, you really are making a difference. I mean, you are sort of like a medical practitioner saving somebody's life because you're saving their dreams, their investments, and you're helping them continue on. And yes, the government might be the one providing the money, but if they don't know how to get it, and they don't know how to get it with limited risk, it's not really their money. And they're not sleeping well at night. I mean, nights are already difficult enough as it is. So, the accountants out there have just done a phenomenal service over the last few years. And my hat goes off to every single one of them. It has been so difficult.
Yeah, no doubt. Pretty soon they'll be asking, is there an accountant on the plane?
Maybe. I don't know. Accountants generally aren't good at flying planes, but some are.
Well, this is true. There might be some kind of accounting emergency. We don't know. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
So you've obviously been doing this a long time, and you come from an accounting family, as you mentioned. So what would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in the past 5 to 7 years or longer, or throughout your career, or even before you became a CPA, because you lived it from a young age?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you say from a young age. I mean, I started out doing this when I was about 4 years old, according to
Seriously?
Sort of, because I mean, it was a family business.
Yeah.
So my parents did the courses, and I was a baby, and they put me in a little box, a paper box, once they handed out the books, and they taught the course, and I was just sitting there going goo goo gaga, having fun. But when you get to the age of 4, I was out there handing out highlighters and opening the doors and picking up garbage and helping out. So right from a young age, we didn't learn the tax and accounting side, but we learned the entrepreneurial side, the respect side, the figuring things out side.
Gotcha.
So there was a lot of that from the beginning. So we've been involved for a long time. But I gotta say, over the past 5 to 7 years, the biggest challenge, and this was even pre-pandemic, the biggest challenge was the way that tax law was changed and made. Because, in the past, there seemed to be a little bit more of a process. Things moved a little bit slower. But over the last 5 to 7 years, and this isn't just a liberal government thing. Right. This is even prior to that, too. But what would happen is you'd have a government get elected. They wanted to show that they're doing things as quickly as possible. What can we get done in the first 100 days? Yeah. And they roll out all of these ideas, and a lot of them are good ideas. But then they force those ideas on the Department of Finance, and the Department of Finance has to turn it into law, and they got to get it out. And usually these promises come with deadlines. So by the end of the year, this is going to be in effect or whatever. So finance rushes to get it out. Then CRA's got to figure out, what does this mean, and how are we going to administer this? Yeah. What information are we going to ask from people in order to know that they're compliant with this new rule here? How are we going to audit it? How are we going to collect the money? Do they apply through us or somebody else? So there's a lot of questions in a very short time frame. And over the past 5 to 7 years, as things have really been rushed, a lot of the due diligence work has not been there. Okay. And we're starting to see laws that don't actually do what they're supposed to do, or catch way too many people that they shouldn't catch. Okay. And, just one example of that is there were the specified corporate income rules that were introduced just over 5 years ago. And what these rules were supposed to do is, imagine a law firm. And you got 50 partners, but it's really one law firm. And each one of these partners has their own corporation set up. Okay. So then what you have is you have the main law firm, whether it's a partnership or corporation, paying each of these individual corporations X dollars. We'll call it $450,000. Okay. So now you have 50 people getting the small business deduction. So these rules were supposed to catch situations like that. So you couldn't multiply the small business deduction so that all these 50 people aren't paying that low tax rate. That low tax rate should really be for the first $500,000 of earnings for the group as a whole, not split amongst everybody, right? Right. So that's what it was supposed to catch. But the thing is, the way the rules were written and the speed with which they were rolled out just covered so many more situations that are impossible to even determine whether you're caught by these rules or not. Right. If I'm a business and I've got, 50, 60 clients, and I now have to figure out exactly who has an interest in, or who's a shareholder in my business, and who are they related to, and are they, related to anybody who has an interest, not just shareholdings, an interest in any of these clients that are selling to me. Okay. Because if they are, guess what? I now have to track all of them, figure out which customers they are, and I have to separate that income to the side, and I have to say, okay, I don't pay small business tax rate on them, but I can pay it on other people. And I mean, that's just the start of this mess, and it just gets really big. So it's becoming, impossible to comply with some of this new legislation, which is just really bad for small businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
Because small businesses, if they can't comply, they're at the risk of a CRA agent that decides to go a little bit deeper into something, and technically they could be offside very, very easily.
Okay.
And when you're imposing this risk on the taxpayers, you're imposing it on the accountant as well and everybody around. So now everybody just has to operate with this higher level of risk, and often they don't even realize there's this higher level of risk. So I'd say the biggest challenge over the last 5 to 7 years has to do with just the way tax law is made and the extra risk, exposure, administration costs are associated with it.
Okay.
Very, very difficult.
Right. Based on the speed that the laws are created and the multitude of possibilities that could impact it.
Yeah, and I mean, just to give an example, when you're creating something just too quickly here, you're not figuring out if the law actually does what you want it to do. So you haven't got the right parties involved to say, what about this? What about that? What about the other thing? You don't have the right parties involved saying, could we do this in another way? What is your main goal? And when you don't do that, you just catch way too much, and you just don't do it in the right way. And ultimately, what I'm seeing across the country is you have an erosion of the tax system. Because what's happening here is you've created these crazy, or not crazy, but very complex, potentially unfollowable laws. And it's the people that are more aggressive, that are less likely to follow the rules or be honest about things, the ones who are pushing the limits, the ones who would skip in front of you in lines at McDonald's or whatever.
Right.
Those are the ones who are just going ahead and doing it, and they're not getting caught because CRA doesn't have the ability to, first of all, understand the rules, educate everybody, in their base around it, and then catch the people. They don't have the resources to do it. So we're encouraging that skip ahead of everybody in line McDonald philosophy. So the ones with honesty and integrity, who really love, the country and want to build it, are the ones who are getting penalized and really paying the bill for everybody else. And that is a really bad policy to sort of set. And I don't think politicians realize that the result of quick legislation, all of these big ideas, actually is an erosion in exactly, in the entire tax system. It's incentivizing the wrong things.
Okay, so what could be done to change that?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be done is the politicians need to recognize that. And how do you get the politicians to recognize it? And I think what that takes is some major bodies to start producing some papers and doing some research, tying these things together. Because right now it's pretty intangible. It's hard to connect quick decisions, quick ideas with the impact 5 years down the road of businesses going out of business or dealing with this extra uncertainty and risk. But I do think that actions like CPA Canada, what they've been doing in terms of recommending an overall tax review, I think those are good. Also, Bruce Ball with CPA Canada, he's their VP of Taxation, just released a report or an article on, I think it was March 10th or 11th, where he talked specifically about this.
Okay.
And he gave about 5 or 6 recommendations for how the system should change when coming up with tax law. And I mean, ultimately what it comes down to here is you need a law that works for the people who are actually being affected by it. So, I know there are people listening, right now, they're forced or not forced to listen, who don't understand tax law in depth.
Right.
But the thing is, tax law shouldn't be written in depth. It should be written so that the person like them who doesn't understand tax law knows what the rules are and can make a decision. Do I open a new branch? Do I buy more equipment? Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really got to be the focus of everything. And if politicians don't even understanding what the law that they're passing, I mean, that's a problem. They should go through a test first. They should read the legislation and tell us what it means. And if they get it right, then they're allowed to vote. That's how it should go.
Right, without someone writing their speaking notes for them.
Well, sure.
You talk about passing laws quick, and the pandemic was a real game changer, I guess, in that area. Like all the people working from home, compensation issues around benefits. You mentioned a few earlier as well. So how difficult was it for you as a CPA or even for Video Tax News to pivot when all of a sudden you can't have those face-to-face communications with your colleagues or your clients and you're kind of left just handling it?
Yeah, no, that was That was incredibly difficult. I mean, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was incredibly nervous. We had just finished our personal tax update series, which ended off right at the beginning of March. We got our first phone call saying, hey, there's this COVID thing happening. Are you going to cancel the last session? We're like, what COVID thing are you talking about? And that was, I think it was March 3rd was our last session. And then like a week and a half later, they canceled like the NBA and and we're like, holy smokes, and then we realized, 75 to 80% of our business was from live conferences, in-person conferences.
Right.
And we're going, holy smokes, what are we going to do? What if this lasts more than a month? Or more than 2 months? Because, I mean, this is everything. We're going to have to lay people off. We're going to have to change our product. So, so right off the bat, we did some pretty intense brainstorming sessions, and we thought, well, how do we convert our business overnight? And one of the ideas that my sisters came up with was to do more of an intense, in-depth survey for our clients. So we sent out this survey thinking, okay, we have to transition from these in-person sessions to online sessions. Everybody's telling us you can't run a 2-day tax course online. People all go to sleep in the first hour and a half. It's boring as it's boring. So how are you going to figure it out? And we had to think about all the ways that you could stimulate activity, emotion while presenting at the same time. So we sent out the survey and we asked a lot of questions to our clients about this. And we got over 1,000 responses, which was amazing because our clients were so helpful in helping us figure this out. And we were able to incorporate a lot of those suggestions into our session. And my sisters, they're amazing. They were able to take this and figure it out. And we had to build out a whole new platform, online delivery system. They're just absolutely phenomenal. Our whole team at VideoTax, worked day and night to try to figure this thing out. But they managed to do it. And, the crazy thing about it is when we started our first session, we did a test session in about April, so about a month in.
Right.
And we ended up getting about 2,000 people to participate in this one seminar. And what we asked was for people to pay for the session by just improving their community in some kind of way, or they could make a donation or do something like that. And it just turned out really great. I mean, there are so many issues, but to have your first online seminar in interactive with 2,000 people.
That's a good number.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I was so proud of our team for doing that. And then from there, we were just able to work everything into our fall session. And, the craziest thing happened, but our ratings actually went up from where they were before. And I've been very proud of our ratings for a long time. We worked really hard on trying to listen to people and try to make it better every year. But they went up, and I was thinking, we thought people weren't going to stay awake for 2 days of tax. Like, what the heck's going on here? So there's a lot of things that we were able to do to build into it that, I think worked with people, enabled them to stay engaged, to stay awake, to stay involved there. And you know what? It comes down to the little things. The silly little stories about family. And, the thing is, while it doesn't seem like it's adding value to the tax content, what it's doing is it's stimulating your mind so that you're connecting with your kids and you're having fun. And we as presenters are having fun. And when you can connect in that kind of way, I mean, it's a different world. And I mean, for example, one of the contests we did was, what's the animal on Joe's socks today? And everybody would throw out their guesses, and and I'd put my foot up on the screen there, and I'd show everybody what sock I had. It was fun, you just have fun. But anyways, a lot of that stuff came out of those, the surveys. Kudos to our clients, who are just freaking amazing clients, and my sisters and the whole VideoTax News team for doing that.
That's awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah. Oh, I do have to tell you, there's another fellow that works with us that presents. His name is Hugh Nielsen. So he's a pretty big name in the world of accounting.
Okay.
He's a rock star, and he looks like an accounting rock star.
Okay. I was going to ask you about what role has VideoTax News played, if any, in the pandemic with providing supports to CPAs? Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we did was right when the pandemic started, I think everybody realized pretty early that everything was going to change.
All right.
And we had to change with it, and we had to change fast because people were going to need answers. So one of the things that I did, was we created, I started it, but the team built it and put it together, was a COVID support page for accountants.
Okay.
Where what I would do is as soon as any new announcement or legislation came out, we'd right away get it up on the page. And we were scraping a whole bunch of websites to continuously find what the changes were. And we'd announce that, and we'd do video clips, and we'd do connection to webinars and interviews with people who had just applied under different programs. So all of that kind of thing. And I got to say, it was very helpful for me as a learning opportunity because, we were kind of the first one to get a lot of this information up there. And so people were relying on us, and we were having, some days tens of thousands of accountants logging in to check it out.
Right.
And we'd get a lot of feedback, and people would say, "Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I tried this," and sort of we became a bit of a pipeline. We got to hear all the stories across the country of what was happening. So that was really fantastic, and we were able to take that feedback from people and pass it back up to CPA Canada and politicians, and basically say, "Hey, listen, there's a hole here. People are asking about this. What do you want to do with that?" And as we were able to pass that feedback back up, then we'd have additions to an FAQ in respect of a particular program that would address that, or we'd have a new announcement or whatever. So it was kind of neat to sort of almost be on the inside a bit in terms of collecting that information and feeding it back up. And I think the people who used the site appreciated that because not only did they get the information, but they were part of a change. They were part of an information gathering service that was actually providing the feedback to the government. And I mean, one example I can think of is near the beginning, there was a question about CERB. And CERB, in order to get it, you had to have $5,000 of income in a prior period.
Right.
And the question was for a sole proprietor, like a guy who's just doing drywalling but doesn't have a corporation set up.
Yeah.
If he has 10,000 in sales, but his costs are 7,000, well, his gross is 10, so he's met the 5,000 from that perspective, but his net is below 5. So is he good or not? Is it gross versus net?
Yeah.
So we had those conversations. We could pass our concerns up, and then, I'm sure other people were asking as well, and then the government released a comment on it. And then we were able to communicate what the actual answer was from the government. And about 6 months later, it blew up because a bunch of people didn't actually know what the rule was. We knew what it was. We got it out there to our clients, but, people who weren't following us or just regular people who didn't have accountants didn't know about it, and they were basically hit by a train.
Yeah.
And there's a big issue with that, and there's a back and a forth, and it was eventually resolved. But, we saw that train coming earlier, and we were at least able to help, half the people get off the train. Yeah, and the other part, too, is through this pandemic, I mean, the government releases new programs, new guidelines, new comments, but a lot of the time, these new things that are very important weren't actually brought out in a news release or highlighted. Right. So the only way you'd find out about them is if you were scraping a website, like, just going to the FAQ every day and checking anything new.
Right.
And I would say once every 2 days, there was something new and was something important. So we were able to take that and put it into a release ourselves and highlight it for people so that they because we knew what was important. The government people who were posting it, they might not have known, right? So we were able to sort of, bring that together and put it in one place. So that's where we started off. And then from there, we did specialized courses and we did our regular updates, et cetera. But we were able to stay on the forefront of it, and it was very, I think it was helpful to everybody involved.
Yeah, that ability to comb through those websites and scrape through the FAQs, that could be a full-time job in itself. So, so for the average Joe out there, no pun intended, who's maybe doing their own taxes or because I imagine the pandemic probably had an impact on the amount of people who were maybe interacting with accountants, and so a lot of people are probably doing their own taxes or working with people who may not have normally been their regular tax preparer or a CPA or whatever.
Yep. Well, this is the thing. Like over the last, 2 years for sure. I mean, people have become a lot more comfortable relying on their computer to do more personal things.
Right.
Banking has been around for a while, but even more banking. Now more filing your returns on your own, financial planning using, like a Wealth Simple, all that kind of stuff. So people are definitely a lot more buying cryptocurrencies. People are a lot more confident in, they've been forced into being more confident and comfortable in online technologies. And so the worry that I had was, what's this going to do to accountants? Is everybody going to start doing their own tax returns or not? Are they still going to need us or not? And the thing is, we haven't seen a negative change. If anything, we've seen more of a need to involve your accountant.
Okay.
Just because of the complexity of everything. So, once the complexity wears off 4 or 5 years from now, in terms of all these, 5 or 6 years worth of changes, assuming they don't continue to change at this pace here, maybe then you might see a little bit of a drop off. But then, at that point too, there is still a lot of more complicated planning, and a lot of accountants don't want to do returns for somebody who's just got a couple T4s and an RRSP.
Yeah.
Those are kind of they're losses for a lot of accountants. They're more interested in doing the personal tax returns for somebody who owns a business. So you can do sort of the planning between the two sides of it.
Yeah.
And just basically figure out what works best, and how do you transfer this business to your kid? We know you love your kid. Do you trust your kid? Do you like your kid? Things like that. And you want to get into those things and figure out, okay, how can we create a better life for you and your family, and getting into that rather than popping the right things on the return in the right boxes. We don't want to be doing that, and it's not very profitable either unless you've got sort of this mass system in place that really processes them quickly. And technology's starting to do that anyways. So is there going to be less work from accountants? If somebody were to ask me that, I'd say no. I'd say the work might change a little bit. And you just have to kind of move with technology. You gotta use the things that are going to help you file the returns more quickly, but you got to also look for the tools that will give you more real-time insight, so you can provide more real-time comments to your clients. Right. You got to figure out, what are all the flags of bigger issues, and you got to use the technology that will say, hey, listen, you know what, the financial ratios for this person might be out of line. They might need to borrow a little bit, or, they might be going offside with the covenant, things like that. And that's what, the future of accounting is probably going to be. But, at the same time, there's still a lot of that basic compliance work, especially when things are so complicated. Just to figure out how to file your freaking tax return, it's pretty complicated right now.
It definitely is. So what advice or what resources could you point people toward to help break through that clutter and get some clarity around it?
Yeah, well, I think, okay, first of all, when you say, what advice can you give people? There are different groups of people. For a business owner, I'd say get an accountant. For sure.
Yeah.
For an individual, if you've got anything more complicated than just a T4, you're going to probably have to start listening to accountants. So maybe there's some podcasts, some stations, like this as well. I know on Clubhouse, I run a weekly Canadian tax room where taxpayers and tax professionals get together and, just bounce questions off of each other and talk about what's new. So things like that.
Okay.
If you're an accountant, though, this is the problem that accountants have. They get so busy that, their focus is just getting to the end of the day and getting everything filed on time. And when you do that, what you might be encouraged to do is just take on an extra client if you've got an extra hour of space in a week, or something like that. But the thing is, because things are so complicated, I think you have to set up a daily or a weekly routine for yourself to sort of refresh, reconnect with your group, to do that professional development training, once a week at least, or a larger session on a monthly basis, because just spending those 1 to 2 hours, at a time, what you're doing here is you're catching things before they go off the rails. Because, as I was indicating right at the beginning of the interview, some people deal with a complicated situation and they do the same thing again and again until they've convinced themselves that they're doing it right. But until they've talked to somebody else that is saying, you know what, I look at this differently, they don't realize that they're really setting their clients up for a big blow up in the future. So. Right. Having that communication and being intentional about it, specific about it. And the other big thing too, and this is probably one of the biggest things over the last few years, is ethics.
Right.
That ethics course, ethics training, a lot of the time that's seen as just sort of like this extra thing, you should do or you need to do. But I got to say, with so much gray and so much uncertainty, your ethics are tested on a daily basis.
Right.
And you've got to decide, are you the one who's going to be, creating more aggression in the tax system, or are you going to be the one who's trying to bring a little bit more clarity, comfort, and calm to your clients? And what's that going to do for you and your business as well and your reputation? So, you know what? I think the value and the importance of ethics has gone up tenfold over the last, couple of years, especially as we're dealing with this uncertainty out there.
Yeah, and the rapid change. So you want to make sure you're talking to somebody you trust who has ethics at the top of their mind.
Yeah, it's not just about what is the right answer. It's about what is the right answer to you.
Right.
What is the best thing to do going forward, not what can you technically do.
Yeah. Okay. That actually seems like a good place to kind of transition to the end of our podcast.
Sure.
So maybe we'll just finish off with a bigger question or maybe a more personal question. So thinking back over your career, what would you say has kind of been the highlight, or what was your most memorable professional experience or greatest life lesson maybe that you've learned over the years?
Well, there's been a number of fun things. I mean, the last 2 years have been pretty amazing because we hear a lot of feedback about, you saved my business or you've really helped. And I really like that. That's a real validation that what we were doing was the right thing.
Right.
So we really appreciate that. And it's funny, even before the pandemic, a couple times, I've been in an airport and somebody's come up and said, "Hey, can we take a picture with you?"
You're a celebrity.
Yeah. And I have to explain to the people around us, we're big shots in the world of accounting. We have a little joke about it. It's usually tongue in cheek, but those kind of things are fun. But I have to say, one of the most memorable things that have happened, and it wasn't positive at the time, but it's positive now. I remember, so we were transitioning the business because Mom and Dad, Tom and Linda, started this a long time ago.
Yeah.
And about 10 years ago, we formally started the transition. Before that, me and some of my siblings were involved before in different ways, in more minor ways. But that's where the major shifts started occurring. And then about 2 years into sort of that transition, we were doing a session in Kitchener, Ontario, Kitchener-Waterloo. And we did the session and we get the evaluations in, and evaluations are, there's usually a lot of positive. There's, sometimes some criticism in there and that you work with. But there was one comment we got that hit me really hard.
Okay.
And the comment was this. The comment was, Joe should not be on stage teaching. His sister, however, is a good possibility for succession for you, Tom.
Okay.
That hit me really hard.
Yeah, no doubt.
I didn't have a great day, but it wasn't bad, I would say. But I mean, it sat really deep. It was a very, very personal thing because I take pride in a lot of what I try to do. And when it's this business that it's been involved in your family for so long, and somebody's telling you that you're not the one,
right?
And your sister is, now you got sort of a sibling element to it. That was really hard. Yeah. And I felt at that point, I really started questioning everything, and I had to work through it. Okay. And I talked with my dad about it and what he thought about it. And we realized, at the end of the day, everybody sort of has their different areas, strengths and their weaknesses. And, people have good days, people have bad days. That's both you as a presenter and also the people reviewing you as well. So what you really got to do at the end of the day is just try to do a little bit better the next day and realize, that there could be value behind that, and just sort of find the value in that comment. And, I could say even today, I don't feel great about it, but it's also a motivation for me to learn more and talk to more people and get more understanding and just try to do my best and understand. And when you're feeling crappy, just take a breath, go hug a tree, take a walk. And that has been a big thing for me. I think back to that moment when I first saw it, and the look on my sister and my dad's face, because we were, reading them at the same time, right. And, they could feel the pain as well. And they knew what I was going through. But to be able to just sort of like detach from things and just walk outside and take that breath and give your kid a hug, think about what's important and then move on to the next day, that was a big thing for me. So it really prepared me for a lot of these other difficult things. And there's going to be more stuff in the future, but that was kind of a turning point for me. Yeah.
On one hand, I can imagine it was awkward having your dad and your sister there, but I also imagine that I'm sure there is some support in having them there and going through it as a family.
Yeah, there definitely was. And I mean, the first couple words that you hear, you expect them to sort of, comfort and that kind of thing. And there was that, but you know what? It was deeper than that. Yeah. It was like, okay, let's dig into this a little bit deeper. Where do you think it came from? What was meant? Is this a permanent issue or is this a temporary thing? Is there something pervasive here that we need to deal with, and can we? And, just like the logically thinking it through really takes you out of that emotional hole you're in, because when you're in that emotional hole, it's a quick spiral unless you can find a way out.
Yeah.
So just, the experience of them, helping me deal with that and move forward was very important. And I've been able to, try to use that, in other situations with my kids or spouse and other coworkers as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that pretty much wraps it up, I think, for our time here on Straight from the CPA's Mouth. So thank you, Joe, for joining me. I appreciate having you, and thanks for being our first in-person guest since the beginning of COVID, yes.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in. This episode of Straight from the CPA's Mouth featured Joe Devaney, CPA CA and co-owner and contributor to Video Tax News. Don't forget to subscribe to our mailing list, and if you like what you're hearing, have ideas for future episodes, or have any feedback you'd like to share, email us at knowledgecenter@cpaalberta.ca or leave us a comment on social media. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about the Hesje CPA Knowledge Center, you can learn more at cpaalberta.ca/foundation.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Straight from the CPA's Mouth is produced by the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the CPA profession in Alberta. This podcast is made possible by Brian Hesje, FCPA FCA. Thanks to Brian's generous donation, the Foundation created the Hesje CPA Knowledge Center, a virtual hub of resources for all Albertans. Find out more about the Foundation and the Knowledge Center at cpaalberta.ca/foundation.